Well, greetings and welcome to Digital Equity Champions for All Learners, partnering to advance digital equity. This is the second in a series of webinars that we have the exciting opportunity to host or co-host with the American Library Association, Common Sense, and the Council of Chief State School Officers. My name is Dean Folkers, and I serve as the Director of Data and Technology at CCSSO, and I'm thrilled to be able to provide some insights as we move into an exciting hour of information, best practices, and insightful experiences to help advance the work of digital equity. A couple of quick housekeeping pieces. Um, Most all of you should probably be not able to turn off or on the mute button, but if you could remain muted just to avoid any background noise, that would be great. We plan to use the chat as a vehicle for communicating comments among and across the participants. But for questions specifically to the panelists, we would love for you to be able to use the Q&A. We are recording this session so that it can be available for others that either want to review it or don't have the opportunity to participate in today's live discussion. So without further ado, it is my pleasure to welcome Lara Clark with the American Libraries Association, who will serve as your host and facilitator for the rest of the webinar. Thank you. Lara?
Thanks so much, Dean, and to all of the team at CCSSO, and welcome everyone. My name is Lara Clark. I'm a Deputy Director with the American Library Association's Public Policy and Advocacy Office. I'd like to thank CCSSO for hosting us, and also the Office for Education Technology for catalyzing this webinar series to gear up for the Digital Equity Act Competitive Grant Program. I would love it if you all would share your name, organization, and state in the chat. It's always nice to know who's in the room with us. Next slide. We have some great presenters and a lot to talk about today, so we'll hand off from one speaker straight to the next today. Invite you to pose questions or comments in the chat or in the Q&A if you have a question for the panelists as it occurs to you as we go along today. We'll be holding about 10 minutes at the end for the Q&A, which is almost never enough, so we'll try and answer online if we can. We'll be focusing mostly, but not entirely, on school and public libraries as partners advancing digital equity in our communities today. In speaking order, I am thrilled to be joined by Angela Craig, Executive Director of the Charleston County Public Library, with her digital equity partner, or one of them, Christy James, who is the Library Media Services Coordinator for the Charleston County Public Schools. They'll be followed by Amanda Kordelsky, Director of Libraries and Instructional Technology at Norman Public Schools. And then we'll hand over to Amina Fazlullah, the Head of Tech Policy Advocacy at Common Sense, then Noah Lenstra, Associate Professor of Library and Information Science at UNC Greensboro, and Megan McDermott, who is Assistant Vice President of Digital Equity for Connect All in New York. Whew. All right, next slide, please. I want to reserve the bulk of time for our local and state experts, so we'll quickly provide just a bit of context before handing off to Angela. Here's our agenda, which is pretty straightforward. We're going to share some of the why and how of school and library collaboration, tips for developing these relationships, and examples of projects underway or planned before we open up for Q&A. Next slide. A few quick setup notes for those not already working with your public and school librarian colleagues. There's about 17,000 public library locations across the country, so all of you should have at least one public library in your community. Second, your school and public library staff center equity every day in ensuring students have access to physical and digital resources and the technology and skills to use them. These human resources are phenomenal, and I hope every single one of you will connect with your school librarian and/or public library colleagues again or for the first time after our webinar today. And third, your librarians are expert collaborators. School librarians are coordinating with other educators every day to support student achievement, build research skills, encourage a love of reading and learning, and addressing a wide range of technology needs and skills building. And schools are the #1 partner for our public libraries, including for joint library cards and digital resource sharing. Next slide. And just a bit more about libraries, as you can find library workers in virtually every setting, including public and private schools, colleges and universities, military bases, on tribal lands, and more. And for our CCSSO members, you have a library counterpart at the state level in our state library agencies. So hopefully you're already working with them as well. Next slide. My last 3 slides provide a bit more context specific to digital equity, plus some links I hope that will be helpful. In my conversations with NTIA staff, it is clear that collaboration and scale will matter in terms of prioritizing applications in the $1.25 billion competitive grant program. We expect the notice of funding opportunity with more detail by the end of May or early June, but getting the most value for this public investment means that school, library, and nonprofit leaders should be working together right now to explore how they can best serve covered populations, which include low-income households, people with disabilities, English language learners, members of racial and ethnic minorities, and rural residents. And I'm going to pop a note into the chat if this is all new to you. You can take a look at that in terms of the populations that are included. And next slide. About 20% of public libraries already are members of digital equity coalitions, and we have a few examples linked here if you'd like to learn more about them and how they work. Angela and Christy are members of the Low Country Coalition and contributed to the South Carolina State Digital Equity Plan. So if you'd like to hear about that, you can ask them a question. They'll probably touch on it. And here, next slide, are 2 more links that provide additional information and tools that may be helpful if you're just starting out in this kind of a collaboration. And with that, it is my pleasure to introduce 2 fantastic library leaders working in Charleston County, South Carolina, Angela and Christy.
Hello, everyone. My name is Angela Craig. I'm the Executive Director of the Charleston County Public Library. And Christy, would you like to introduce yourself as well?
I'm Christy James. I am the Library Media Services Coordinator for Charleston County School District.
And Christy and I have had a wonderful partnership together between our public library and our public schools. We also have been fortunate to be able to work together with several other groups with the Low Country Digital Equity Coalition, just like Lara was talking about. States are figuring out quite quickly that the infrastructure for broadband access is not equitable across the state. South Carolina, as I'm sure you can imagine, has quite a few challenges. Charleston County is a lovely county. We have 18 library locations all across the county, but the digital access in those areas is very inconsistent. And so we work with an infrastructure that definitely needs some work. What the Low Country Digital Equity Coalition has been focusing on, they have some very lofty goals. They focus on access, understanding, and adoption. What they are doing is that they are reaching out to underserved and communities that may not have equitable access, and they are working to make sure that there's broadband access out there as well as devices that people can utilize to access the internet. It is definitely not the same across the county, and that the Digital Equity Coalition is working with Charleston, Berkeley, and Dorchester counties. So there's 3 counties that they're working on. From a public library standpoint, we have been very active in helping our patrons understand and connect with the Affordable Connectivity Program with the FCC, and we have been helping the Low Country Digital Equity Coalition lead workshops there, as well as having other digital literacy workshops that support that work. And Christy, from a school standpoint, do you want to weigh in on how CCSD is supporting digital equity?
As part of the Low Country Digital Equity Coalition, it's obviously the public library system, the school system are 2 of the largest members, But what's been so impactful about this is we're able to bring the reach that we have with our public libraries and the school system and connect with a lot of these smaller organizations, because we definitely did not invent the interest in digital equity. And we have a very interested community. And this is giving us the opportunity to connect with all of those partners and bring them together so we can make the best use of these future funding opportunities, but also just getting a solid sense of what is available already, what's in place, who can be mobilized to put things into action immediately, as well as thinking long term as far as what are our needs. We have some pretty obvious needs as far as we have pockets of our community that truly do not have digital access, that their access is extremely limited either by geography or lack of infrastructure. And we can see what those needs are, as well as what is it going to take to make sure that once access does happen, because we feel confident that that is coming, but what is it going to take to leverage that access and actually make it benefit the larger community?
Being able to work with the public school and in a public library setting with the Digital Equity Coalition has been very helpful for our patrons. As I'm sure you can imagine, we have patrons and students of all different levels of access. So being able to get information to them about how to get devices, how to get internet in their homes from different levels, through the school, through the public library, through these partnerships has been very impactful. The huge benefit of the coalition is that we have been able to work with many organizations, just like Christy was saying, to advocate and collaborate and assess and give feedback to the state of South Carolina about where the gaps are, what we're seeing in real time, what the impact needs to be, and if what is happening is working. There are a lot of players in the digital equity space, and what the coalition has done effectively and is still working on is bringing together everyone who has a stake in the digital equity table and having us share our best practices, see where we overlap, see where we can partner, and it's been very effective. It was nice to be an early adopter of this, and we are still learning. We've had some growing pains. Often we will make a plan and then we'll realize that we need to reach out to the population in person. We need to do some structured outreach. So we have my outreach team go out to the areas where there is no digital access at all, because we're trying to help people get access and they don't have even reliable phone service at times. So we hand deliver flyers and information, and then we'll host sessions at the public library or at schools. And that's been a very effective way to get information and advocacy efforts out into the more rural areas as well. We can go to the next slide. That's okay. A wonderful partnership that Christy and I have between our two organizations with the Charleston County Public Library and the Charleston Public School District is our Limitless Learning Partnership. This is something that actually public libraries have been doing for a while in other communities, but it was really timely. We launched this during COVID. We'd had the plan to launch this long before COVID, but COVID expedited that process. What it is that the CCSD public school students can use their school ID as public library cards, and that gives them direct access to all of our catalog with CCPL, all of our books, movies, databases. They can use it in person at branches. They can also use it online as a virtual patron. We have found that it has steadily increased every single year. The first year in 2020, it was an interesting launch because it was 2020 and COVID, and I think people were overwhelmed, but we did have use, and people who were, strictly learning from home were able to access library resources, and it has steadily grown every year. From an infrastructure standpoint, we use Sora, which is Overdrive for Education, and that connects the district to the library system. And Christy, I'm going to turn it over to you to talk about the public side. Oh, you're muted, Christy.
Yep. Okay, now I'm not going to touch anything. Yeah, so the Limitless Learning, the L Squared program, this was a brainchild that we had been working behind the scenes trying to figure out all the MOUs, the data sharing pieces to make sure that, of course, both libraries, school districts, very concerned about student privacy, that we had everything in place to be able to fully roll this out. And it really was, I don't know if good timing is the right word, but we had people really take full advantage of it immediately because it was COVID and there was such a need. But we also were lucky because Angela had come from another library system that had this in place. And so she had seen the impact of this. And so it was perfect timing that we had been doing a lot of the background work and she came in at the right time to push us forward. Libraries are about connecting people. They're about connecting resources. They're about connecting opportunities. And that's really what this Limitless Learning piece does. It's been the foundation for making sure that all of our kids do have 24/7 access. And there's always going to be things that the schools can offer, excuse me, a good bit, but there's so much more that are available through our public libraries. And that piece has been really, really powerful to make sure that all of our families and the rest of the community are connected. We tried to make it as simple and straightforward as possible, no extra usernames, no extra passwords, but this digital equity piece behind this, aside from obviously offering the extra databases that the public library has, offering the extra digital collections through Overdrive. It's been something that we've also been able to use as a communication piece. So Charleston County Public Library, Angela can speak to this a little bit more, but the public library has been in the process of doing a large-scale community survey about digital services, and having the reach and being able to share that through the school district has been powerful. Our schools make full use of the public library's outreach department. The public library has this incredible mobile library that visits targeted summer programs, that visits special community events. And again, this is all about connecting students, connecting their families with other things that are happening in the community. But at the heart of it, a lot of this does go back to providing basic access and making sure that families have access to devices, families have access to hotspots, families can take advantage of the mobile library to use what's there as well. We're kind of excited about it. This is one of my babies. So
we love this program and we love working with Christy. I often refer to CCPL, the public library, as the out of school time partner for the public library. I'm very, very clear that when students are not in school, they are usually in one of our 18 library locations. And I think that's true for public libraries across the country. We are a natural partner for public education. A lot of my staff, myself included, are students, our kids are students in public education. And so they're using L Squared as students and as library members. But we work really hard to complement the public school to make sure that our collection reflects what is being studied or what books they may or may not have access to or the money to buy or things like that. And it's important for us to be the partner that is needed, because honestly, the public schools are the partner whenever we need a good partner. So it's a wonderful partnership, great collaboration, and it just makes our communities stronger. Thanks so much. I think you can advance the slide for the next speaker.
And over to Amanda, yeah?
Thank you, Lara.
Awesome.
So I'm Amanda Kordelsky, and I'm the district librarian, library director for a suburban school district in Oklahoma. And we have a lot of similar programs to South Carolina and also similar issues. We were lucky that we went one-to-one with all of our secondary students right before the pandemic in the 2017-18 school year with a bond issue that our voters passed for us. And then at the elementary level, we are at 1 to 3, 1 to 4, depending on enrollment for the school with iPads, but they do not take those home. Secondary students have access to take their devices home starting in 7th grade. And so we were a little bit ahead of a curve when the pandemic happened in that many of our kids had devices, but we ended up with this discovering the same issues as South Carolina in that even though I'm suburban, I have some very rural areas of my district and there is not connectivity. And so we could loan a certain amount of hotspots, but we have a really incredible partnership with our public library as well. And so we worked in tandem to be able to loan out hotspots to family members and students, because sometimes we could give a hotspot, but if there are 3 kids in a household plus 2 parents who are also having to work from home during the pandemic, all trying to connect to one hotspot, it doesn't make for very successful internet exploration. So we worked together with our public library to do that. And then already in the works that we had planned to launch in the summer of 2020 was a learning bus that we had built that is a bookmobile, but also has STEM and Makermobile resources on it. So it didn't get to launch in 2020 because we couldn't launch it safely in the summer, but that gave us an extra year to be able to collaborate with our public library and take it out and about the district on our breaks and when we're off. And so some of the things that we were able to add through ARPA money during the pandemic, the bus is outfitted with Wi-Fi, and we also turned on the Sora for Overdrive. We already had an independent Sora account for our district, but during the pandemic, we were able to connect our Overdrive to the public library's Overdrive through Sora. So our kids had even more digital resources to access, and we often collaborate with them, especially on really popular titles like State Award List or One Book, One School reads that we're currently doing, to make sure that even if I wasn't able to purchase with my budget how many copies of access for a certain book that we needed, the public library would backfill in all of those resources to make sure everybody had access to the books that they needed to read. We have had what we call ours a smart card. I really like the L squared though, it's very cool. Ours is a smart card, and the way our program works is when you enroll in Norman Public Schools, you're automatically issued a public library card. And we've been doing that since the late 80s. And that partnership has continued to grow as digital representation in the library and digital resources has expanded greatly. So every couple of months I meet with my public librarians and we talk about what databases that I'm able to provide and what databases that I cannot provide but would really like to. And we collaborate so that they often are purchasing databases for everyone to use, but specifically marketed to our kids and to the kiddos in our school system. With the Wi-Fi on the bus, we started running, we run 4 days a week in the summer and all of June and July and a little bit into August until school starts. And at one park that we stop at every day, we have our public librarians who push in and they bring their very fancy Makermobile that does so many more things than what my little STEM kit does on my bus, so that we can expand those offerings to our kids, and they have the opportunity to get on our bus and check out books, but also work with the public library and be able to use their resources and participate in summer learning, even if they are too far away to be able to walk or take the bus to the public library in the summer to participate in person at the library. The Learning Bus has given us an opportunity to partner with several other companies and organizations in our our city. One was the Girl Scouts that we worked with last year. And so these are just a couple of ideas of other digital equity partners that you could work with. We have partnered with the health department. We try to every June and July to have vaccinations or information about where the vaccination clinics are going to be before back to school starts for all of our parents. And then also translators. We have a very large Spanish speaking population. And so to have librarians and nurses and health assistants who can come to the learning bus and be able to talk to everyone who might have a question about what they are wanting to do or what they're needing to be able to do before school starts. So with our partnerships, we have expanded our hotspots and are anticipating having to do more hotspots if the Affordable Connectivity Program isn't extended. We have a significant number of Oklahomans that are taking advantage of that program. And so we've already begun to game plan how to make sure that we can still keep everyone connected. And then last year we launched a specialty high school called the Oklahoma Aviation Academy, and our public library has been an invaluable partner in that, helping us find databases and purchase databases that deal directly with the aviation industry. But the most fun is that they come in and do a lot of STEM-centered activities around aviation, both in our schools and with the Learning Bus. And then we can advance to the next slide. And this is my digital equity dream list that I have. More staffing for the bus, including an outreach librarian. Currently, my site librarians at all of my schools staff the bus in the summer. So there are a lot of opportunities that we miss out on. And we have a couple of populations that I don't feel like we're doing the best job reaching right now because of staffing. So being able to have more equitable staffing so we can reach more people. And then a collaborative STEAM lab between the public library and the public school system, so that more and more of our customers and our students have access to those really incredible resources and inventive making opportunities. And then we have approximately 68 languages, last I checked about a month ago, 68 languages spoken other than English in my district, which, as most libraries know, really stretches your budget, trying to make sure that you're able to purchase all of those resources in all of the languages that you need. And so we really, that is one of the most important parts of our partnership that we have with the public library, is purchasing more non-English resources. And in my dream list for digital equity includes an entire bus of non-English books that we can circulate throughout the learning bus and the district. We have also partnered to do some of the traveling exhibits that we've taken advantage of through the National Archives or through ALA. They are often on display at the public library, as they have much more space and less security concerns. And then we bus our kids over so that they can go through all of the traveling exhibits. Last year, they had a financial literacy one, and all of our fourth graders went through and participated in a lot of different programs and activities that connected back to financial literacy, which is one of our standards that we work on. And none of those things would have been possible without a strong school public partnership with our libraries. And I am going to throw it to Amina, I believe, and she's going to talk about common sense.
Thanks, Amanda.
Our next section is focused on sort of blue sky thinking around these partnerships. It's so exciting to hear what's being done, what's been done, especially through libraries and schools. And part of what I wanted to talk about, and our next two speakers will be talking about, are sort of opportunities that lie ahead and some of the sort of non-traditional partners. So not just libraries and schools, but also nonprofits. So for example, at Common Sense, at the start of the ACP, We recognize that getting the word out on the Affordable Connectivity Program would be incredibly useful and could be an opportunity to also pair our this wonderful benefit with resources related to digital equity. We have digital literacy resources that are family facing. And so what we were able to do throughout the course of the past few years was partner, try out a few different partnerships, primarily in Arizona. We partnered with the Digital Equity Institute and worked to train and support a team of folks who would be taking ACP interested enrollees over the phone. We also stood up an advertising campaign to get the word out quickly. And we also partnered through schools. That's traditionally our sort of strongest partner. And partnering through schools has allowed us to be able to push our digital literacy materials and make sure that they're form fit for the community. But what we noticed was that especially during the pandemic, was that as families were getting connected to the internet or were responsible for remote learning, that caregivers were an important piece of the puzzle. It was really important that we had digital literacy materials for caregivers. That continues to this day. And so what we've heard from various school partners, not just in Arizona, but elsewhere, was that one of the interesting pieces of pushing technology into the home and connecting it to the classroom was having parents who otherwise didn't have connectivity to be able to start to communicate with teachers and to participate in some of the parent-facing tools. So flash forward, we're now working closely. We worked closely with the City of Phoenix to continue pushing forward the ACP outreach program, our ACP outreach program through schools as well as in person at events. But then we also have expanded our partnership with the Digital Equity Institute to support hives in the community. So these are in-person locations where anybody can come in to get digital literacy materials. And that's really exciting. And I think what we hope is that there can be community-specific partnerships where the hives can reflect the needs of the community. So whether that's partnering with public libraries or partnering with schools in the area, we can make sure that in-person hive will have the resources to sort of speak to the needs that are there. And that kind of collaboration is part of, I think, some of the blue sky thinking that we want to kick off with this next section. Part of my understanding from the NTIA is that they really will prize collaboration within the course of the Digital Equity Act grants, and making sure that we think through how can schools, NGOs, and libraries partner together to be comprehensive in a community. I think will be really exciting. Part of the work or part of the requirements of the DEA grant also include a lot of reporting and metrics. And, while I think that might seem daunting, I think when you work in partnership, you would be able to potentially slice and dice those types of reporting and metrics so that, if a school traditionally wouldn't be able to get some of that information, maybe a library partner could. A library partner can't, maybe it's an NGO partner. And so you'll have a more fulsome look at the impact of your program. One other thing that we mentioned early in the pandemic, and this arose out of just sheer necessity, was the use of digital needs assessments at the school level. The use of digital needs assessments, I think, is an incredible opportunity to have your finger on the pulse of your community. And it could be really valuable, not just for the school itself, but for your library partner, for your NGO, and right up the chain for the state broadband office and elsewhere. there is an opportunity, through Digital Equity Act grants to be able to formalize that process and really support schools as they do that kind of digital needs assessment, and even to contemplate how could other partners do similar types of digital needs assessment, what type of data would we gather, and how can we harmonize them. As we go forward, I want to pass this along to our next speaker. Megan comes to us by way of New York Broadband Office, and I'm just going to go ahead and pass it on to her.
Thank you so much, Amina. I have to say, it's been a real pleasure just being able to listen to the projects and the collaborations that have been presented. And when you talk about Blue Sky, so much here is offering great insight, momentum, excitement about the possibilities when the collaboration is genuine and focused on what makes people work well together. So I'll just share very quickly. My name is Megan McDermott. I'm the Assistant Vice President for Digital Equity here at Connect All, which is housed within the Empire State Development Corporation. As Amina said, we basically function as the broadband office for the state. My particular vantage point is our digital equity grants and plan program. So I'll speak a little bit from there, but just wanted to share that, how we got to this moment in New York in response to the Digital Equity Act funds that are coming came through a lot of deep participatory engagement with digital equity advocates, with practitioners, with sister state agencies, certainly with public library partners, with higher education, but I still feel like a voice that we could hear more from are those of you who are very much in those formal and informal learning spaces, who think about pedagogy, who think about teaching and learning, and actually see where digital equity could further drive forward the things that you're most concerned about. So really love, for example, the dream list, because with these funds, we're very interested in supporting very targeted strategic digital equity efforts that can amplify outcomes for a range of communities and populations, but done in a way, for example, from that dream list, that really facilitate multilingual access to learning. Right? So that's one example. To think about devices not simply as a transactional receipt around a thing that is time-bound and has, planned obsolescence around it, as much as devices as they're instrumental to digital literacies and web literacies, media literacies, or in the context of learning, really about critical thinking. One example I'll share is a kind of challenge that we face in New York that I think hearing more from educators, sort of, as Amina said, the digital needs assessment would certainly help inform the way that we're approaching our own work, is a situation where we hear a lot about pipelines in learning, where, for example, public university students who are interested in computer science may or may not actually enroll in computer science at the higher education level if they don't have a device. Or they might be found to high degrees sitting in classes, computer science classes, with pencil and paper, right? And then what that does is it makes us really think about the long term. If our ultimate goals for a lot of the digital equity funding is to move the needle on better outcomes for education, health, job readiness, civic engagement, and accessibility of government services, that student having that device certainly is instrumental in that moment in that classroom, but becomes part potentially of a completion of enrollment and pipeline engagement in a portfolio for employment at the end. So I share these as examples of the kinds of needs that we're facing. Certainly as a state, we have about, I think it's 1,100 sites, public library sites. In New York City, there's over 200 branches alone. They do incredible work. But again, that collaboration that we saw here earlier with regard to what it is that K through 12 students need in particular, and what libraries can do, again, ups the ante, and it gives us a higher standard to reach for. And I'll just share finally that the value of the Blue Sky piece and all of this funding is not just thinking about the one action that can be taken. Those are necessary. But this is we have an opportunity to really think about determining what an ecosystem can offer, what a digital equity ecosystem might mean. And by ecosystem, what I'm really talking about is the social infrastructure. I'm talking about the relationships and the collaborations that ensure that where there has been a partnership or an intervention to make progress on a particular need, there's long-term durability in those lessons and what that means for ongoing shifts in policy and investment across the board. So with that, I'll just share that, the mobile library example is fantastic. I think that says a lot, thinking about your digital literacy practitioners who might be outside the school system, might be more in your informal learning spaces, are worth developing relationships with. Here in New York, we have Hive. And from there, I would also suggest even thinking creatively about museums as potential partners in your collaboration. And one other area that I would love to see more activity so that we can certainly learn and inform our own grant making ahead for digital equity is where the particular needs of learners with disabilities are being addressed, whether that's neurodivergence to assistive technologies, and would highly recommend folks getting a look at this really lovely Southern Tier library project that happened in New York. I'll follow up with a link, but it's called Disability Justice for Digital Justice. And there it was a way in which people with lived experience engaged in library settings and really thought through a process of growth for what libraries could do to be improved for all people with disabilities. And I say that not as a deficit, but as an opportunity, because when you think about that in relationship to the needs of all kinds of students, there's so much great collaboration ahead. So I'll leave it there.
Great. Well, thanks, Megan and Amina, and thanks everyone. And I'll keep my remarks relatively brief, so there's plenty of time for Q&A. So I love this call for blue sky thinking. And my research, which I'll say a little bit more about in a minute, is really focused on understanding what does it look like for potential partners to conceptualize public libraries. In other words, how do partners in schools, nonprofits, museums, what do they think about when they think about libraries, if they think about libraries at all? And what I've really found is that there is a lack of blue sky thinking when it comes to conceptualizing public libraries as funding partners. They're often seen, if they're perceived as kind of this trusted resource, a space that's always there that people turn to, that has stability and trust embedded in it. But it usually takes a lot of work for people to get to the stage of, okay, before we do anything, we need to get a librarian on our digital equity coalition. We need to make sure that librarians are in the room from day one, because if they're not in the room from day one, you're really missing out on opportunities to tap into that expertise about people's lived experience and about pockets of poverty, which are typically seen by public libraries in ways that extend beyond what may be visible in other spaces. I often say public libraries are the canaries in the coal mine, seeing things often before they appear anyplace else. And really just to kind of give an example of what it looks like when we get to this stage 3 thinking, I had the opportunity a couple weeks ago to be in a session at the North Carolina Rural Center with our state librarian, Michelle Underhill, and the director of the new regional library, Melanie Morgan. And Melanie, her library system serves 3 rural counties in eastern North Carolina. One of those counties is Jones County, which serves a population under 10,000, and like other kind of rural counties in eastern North Carolina has extreme digital connectivity issues. So they got a grant to circulate hotspots to families that might need connectivity. But they found out, okay, if people have these hotspots, there's still no towers for them to connect to. And so then the library, I put a link, the library actually worked with Eastern Carolina Broadband of Pink Hill, a local company, to purchase. The library literally purchased 2 under 200 feet towers, which they then placed in strategic locations in the heart of Jones County. And so what does this tell us? What is the lesson? Would we expect every public library to purchase broadband towers? No, of course not. But you don't know what's going to come from your partnership until you build that relationship. So I really encourage folks to reach out now, start building those relationships, start building those connections, because you don't know what your blue sky vision is going to look like until you've put the time in to build the relationships and build the coalitions. Next slide, please. And this is just a little bit of my bona fides, as it were. I'm going to pass by this really quick. But one of the things that I recently wrapped up was kind of a large national project in which we interviewed people in 18 communities across the U.S., both libraries and partners. And to Amina's point, the biggest number of our partners were actually with nonprofit organizations about the experience of nonprofits working with public libraries. In this case, focused on health things. And I'll just mention a few things. Angela didn't mention that, but I want to make sure to also mention telehealth and telemedicine. Angela's library, Charleston County, is a participant in this WISE Women in the Southeast Telehealth Network. That's another area where there's huge opportunities, a little bit tangential to the topic that we're mentioning today. But when we think about blue sky and health, I'd be remiss to not mention the great work that's happening in telehealth. And again, I think that the key thing is to really make sure that we are thinking of libraries when we're kind of brainstorming and coming together as a community to think about the future. And I really found this to be essential to say over and over again when I was at the North Carolina Rural Center conference and was talking with some of my colleagues in building a new digital economy, BAND NC, which is part of the Institute of Emerging Ideas at North Carolina State University. They're working with North Carolinians across the state to create these digital inclusion plans. And what they found, both within their staff, is that there's a real lack of understanding about why, if you're putting together a digital inclusion plan, why would you want to reach out to a librarian? There's a real lack of understanding about that topic that I can't overemphasize the critical importance of chipping away at that. Next slide, please. And again, this is kind of from the research. What I found is that when people think of libraries as partners, they think of what libraries can do. They think about, okay, can the library distribute something for me? Can the library host something for me? Can the library market something for me? What can the library do for me? And what I'm really encouraging is kind of a shift in thinking, a shift away from kind of this, what can the library do for me, to instead asking, what is the expertise embedded in librarians, and how can we unpack and leverage that expertise by bringing them to the table to help us figure out what our digital equity application is going to look like. Next slide, please. And I know we have a lot of librarians here, so I'll also wag my finger, as it were, at the librarians and say, in librarianship, we have to get out of this idea that we're not going to do anything if we don't think we have the capacity to do it, because often, even if we as institutions don't have capacity to do something new, our community might have the capacity. So librarians will often ask, do I have the space to do something new? Do I have the budget to do something new? Do I have the staff to do something new? Do I have the capacity to do something new? Rather than instead asking who else in my community cares about and is passionate about digital equity and digital inclusion, and how can I find those people and develop relationships with them so that we can, as a community, unlock this capacity. And I think that's the end of my slides. So yeah, yeah, and you can just learn more. Here's the link, if you want. But yeah, next slide, please. Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, everyone. I think we addressed many of the questions that were in chat, but in the Q&A. So I will just pause for a moment and see if there's anything folks would like to add, or if there's anything any of the panelists would like to speak to that was in the Q&A. I know we responded to several of those in writing, but would anybody like to say a bit more about any of the questions that we already received in Q&A while we're waiting to see if there's any other questions that people have, or things that you'd like to share that have been difficult in your attempts to partner? I would be glad to hear that as well.
Clara,
Yeah.
you made a good point. You responded to Michael about the status of the Affordable Connectivity Program. And I did not mention, but that, yes, they are running out of money and Congress has not authorized additional funding, but you put the link in there to advocate for it. And we are trying to advocate for it as well, to make sure that the funding is reinstated or there's a plan for it, because it was extremely useful in Charleston County and other counties I know is useful around the country. And so I think the advocacy piece is needed right now for that particular program. So thank you for putting that link in there.
Sure. Yeah, it really is such a loss with 23 million people in every single state benefiting from this program. It's just a tremendous loss if we're not able to get the additional funding to support it. So if you haven't been in touch with your member of Congress, I think now is a really good time to do that. Oh, and thank you. Megan McDermott also added in the chat a resource. There's so many great resources. I know on one of the links that is in our slides, we have tried to connect to some of the NTIA, the National Telecommunications and Information Administration, as well as the NDIA, the National Digital Inclusion Alliance, which Megan is sharing. I don't know if you want to say anything else about this, Megan, because there is work happening right now in terms of the capacity grants. We've been gearing up for the competitive grants, but I don't know if you want to say a little bit more about this.
Sure, I just put this in as a resource because I really love Noah's slide about, rather than just what can you do for me, what can we all do together? But I also think states need to be better informed across the board. New York State engaged in a very deeply participatory process with a range of stakeholders, 5,000 responses to an internet access survey, 150 public comments to the digital equity plan, many focus groups and listening sessions across all of our regions. However, I still think, to this blue sky question, getting direct contact from again, folks who are doing teaching and learning in formal and informal spaces and in demonstrated partnerships with community organizations, libraries, really ups the ante and gives states a sense of model, because this is historic funding. It's going to come once. Many states might only engage in a transactional distribution of those funds. Yet again, with collaboration and learning, we do have an opportunity to inform what will sustain. And that sustainability is not like one thing written in stone, as much as it's all of the relationships together constantly driving forward how we can do deeper, better work for a range of communities. So again, thinking through needs, wish lists, collaborations, ways to share data, really, I think taking advantage of your expertise to push states towards what can be done is a real opportunity. So certainly welcome it here in New York.
Awesome. There's also a link that I shared that takes you to, if you haven't already been in touch with your state broadband office, like where Megan has been working, and I think I saw at least one other broadband office person in the room. I strongly encourage them. I encourage all of our members as well to reach out and find out how you can plug in if you haven't done that yet. And I'm going to hand things over, unless any of my panelists would like to say anything else before we wrap. I just want to thank everybody, and I'd love, oh, question in the Q&A. All right, thank you, Kim. Is there a wish list for participation from healthcare systems or health insurance plans? That's a great question. And I know Noah mentioned, and I don't know if Noah or Angela wanted to say anything related to their work with health equity, but this is an area of focus. If you haven't been involved with the digital equity planning, not only are there covered populations that are areas of focus, but there are also focus areas in terms of workforce development and education, which is obviously a great spot for all of us here, but also healthcare. So I don't know if anybody would like to say anything about the question. I know, Noah, you do a lot of work in this area with health, or Amina, but before I pass it over to Dean for any closing remarks, if anybody else would like to speak to this question from Ashley.
Yeah, I'll jump in really quickly. So I think from a healthcare perspective, the really blue sky dreams look a little bit different in urban and rural parts of America. I think in rural, especially after the pandemic, it's absolutely telemedicine, telehealth, ramping up infrastructure to make that a sustainable and in-reach option for more and more Americans. In urban communities, we're seeing more and more hospitals and healthcare systems work to establish and maintain community wellness and health hubs that might be located in non-traditional spaces. So a couple of weeks ago at the Public Library Association, there was actually a great presentation with one of the largest healthcare systems in St. Louis about their robust partnership with the St. Louis County Library to set up these community wellness hubs. So I think those are a couple of trends that we're seeing in the healthcare space that might be worth considering if we're bringing health into the ecosystem.
Thank you, Noah. And I'm going to pass the baton to Dean. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Lara. I think one of the comments in the chat I saw early on was just how wonderful it is to see the depth of collaboration and connection that's happening within communities and schools and libraries, and just amazing stuff. And it's you never can get enough of the great things that are happening to stimulate additional ideas. And so from that metric, our second webinar, in my opinion, was a smashing success, because our series really has been focused on providing opportunities for people to think about some elements and efforts of work that has happened to impact the digital equity, digital inclusion space in preparation for the resources that are going to be released here in the coming months through the Department of Commerce NTIA grant project work. So with that, we have plans for a third version of this webinar in May, or this webinar series. We're working out the last minute details, but probably looking at the afternoon of May 13th, which is, I believe, the Tuesday. And we'll ensure that as the details and the web links, as well as for some of those folks that might be able to attend in person at the IMAC meeting in Seattle, Washington, we'll make sure the details around that will be coming out shortly. So with that, thank you again. Please give a virtual round of applause to our fabulous panel. Amazing things happening in and around the country, and we appreciate very much your time this afternoon. One last thing, the recording of this webinar will be available. We'll once we get it rendered and posted, we'll send out an email to the folks that were registered for this, and then feel free to share with your networks and others about this great work. Thank you again and have a fabulous rest of your day.